It's what you fill that makes it buff, right?
Yes. Look, I either fill the top or I fill the room. I fill many spaces. Aeroplanes are particularly hard for me.
What's odd?
Hard. Aeroplanes are particularly hard for me because, when I walk in through the aisle, my shoulders touch on both sides.
Oh, oh.
It's
I'm
true.
not
The
going to
struggle is
check.
real.
I'm not going to check if we are live. I'm just going to assume that we
We
are
should
live
assume that we're
because
live. Let's do
this
that.
is this is not your grandmother's ADSL at home, right? So we assume that we're live and that things are actually being broadcast on the interwebs and the Twitteratis or the LinkedIn's and the
Alistair,
YouTubes, right?
you reminded me of something. Today, not today, this week, and it could have been you, and it's been a busy week, so I apologize, but I think it was you who told me about a customer's ISDN line that they still have to use.
Wasn't me.
128K,
Wasn't me.
wasn't you? So
Thankfully,
that was a
no.
thing this week. Hearing that customers are still on 128K ISDN, and what do you do with that? What do you do with 128K ISDN?
How is that even possible? What's the fax machine, right?
No, fax machine could work on 64K. And actually, if you remember correctly, very sad that I know this, but a fax machine could throttle all the way up down to 9,600 baud bits per second. And ISDN dual channel runs at 128 both ways, 128K both ways.
For video conferencing, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Those were the days.
Anyhow,
Should we roll the jingle?
jingle took a while to run, but welcome to SCI Fridays, where firewalls are feelings, VPNs are vibes, and inside the network is just a comfort lie we tell ourselves. This is the show where we take a blunt but slightly cynical look at security, compliance, and identity in the real world, where tools are expensive, configs are messy, and attackers mostly just log in rather than break in. Welcome, Nick.
Happy Friday, Al. Happy Friday. You've made it through another week. Well done. Good adulting. Adulting.
Mm.
Adulting. That's what I said. Yes. Yes.
This is Friday, the 24th of July. Just so that we put a stamp on it for those that are watching or for those that will want to watch us late at night when they are bored.
And I would watch us if I was bored, if there was nothing else. And this is week 7 of this current series of SCI Friday. Today, we talk about everything is fine until it isn't. It's like that
What
dog.
is the topic?
It's
I
that dog,
actually have to
Al,
go to the
sitting
website because we
and
have a
everything's
website.
burning around him, and he says everything is fine.
Like that. Was it cat dog? Was it cat
Yes,
dog?
it's the cartoon. Everything is fine.
Yes, I'm sure it's from there, right?
Mm.
Yes, everything is fine until it isn't. And when did we do? Yes, last week we talked about the Security Operations Center, right? And this is
Yes,
kind
last
of
week
a
is
follow on
Big Brother
of
is
that.
your sock. I'm seeing it on my other screen.
Yeah, yeah. So the main topic today is to talk about what happens inside of a SOC. What is the Security Operations Center? Why does it matter? And why do people actually get employed to stare at dashboards? Right.
Are you
Suppose
going to
that's
present
the.
something?
I am. Where do we do this? I click the share button and I say entire screen. Yes, entire screen.
Is
There
that
we go.
that
Everything is
105-inch
fine.
screen that you use on your desk?
This is nuts. I wish, I wish. Um, hmm. Now you're making me think. Imagine the entire wall was a screen, right?
Yes. Doesn't take much to derail you.
Take a lot's got a sale on right now, Nick. And you need to
Yeah.
understand that I've been looking at things.
Maybe we should present that.
Anyhow, squirrel.
Squirrel.
Coming back to what we normally talk about. So, for those that are new here, each week we unpack the gap between pretty architecture diagrams and what actually happens in production. Ergo, what happens inside of a security operations center and why it's vitally important to your daily lives and to most companies' daily lives, right? Uh, so, yeah, incident response, right, without the fantasy is really what we want to talk about and explain to you. And for those companies that, and it's not so much the big guys, right? It's the smaller guys that, there's five people in an office and they do employee benefits or they do some sort of accounting thing and they've got 30 customers. Why should they worry about what actually happens when someone in the organization clicks on
Mm,
a link that it looks like it's from their
mm,
kid's creche and all of a sudden their identity is compromised? What actually happens on the back end and why customers like that should either, well, no, they should just offload it to an MSP that's going to worry about these things. But typically, our runner show does not start with the main topic. It starts with other things, Nick, because we always go through a run of show. So today we are going to talk about a few alarms, um, a dairy giant halted, and a few other things. And then we'll take you through the main topic, things that you need to think about, like first detect and then do something with that,
mm.
and what this process actually looks like inside of a security operations center, or at least we hope that it looks like this. The other things to consider if you are a company with an IT person or a couple of IT people, what they should be thinking about when it comes to what you do from a, can we call it an XDR, EDR? There's always a DR, and it's not disaster recovery, it's detect and response, right? And then also
Mm,
our plage, like plagiarize, our
page.
one page playbook for
That
all
you can
things.
plagiarize.
We can plagiarize a playbook, right?
Yes.
And we can
And
playbook on
people
the
can use ours. If you
plagiarization.
don't have one, use ours.
Use ours. You can plagiarize our playbook. Exactly. That's the one thing that Nick always talks about, his take homes. So let's have a look at what actually happened in the world of cyber this week.
In the news. You're not going to do that line. Do the line.
Should I do it?
Do it.
In the news. We need a
In,
jingle. I need a jingle for that segment.
mm,
That's what
mm.
I need.
Shall we talk about $4 billion worth of high protein? That's a lot of dollars worth of protein. A dairy company, Fairlife LLC, was hit by a ransomware attack. Surprise. And we say surprise because, ransomware is not a new thing. But what did happen is, and great names for these things, there's a ransomware gang called Anubis. So if you're into your Egyptian mythology, you
Mm.
know that Anubis was not one of the happy gods, rather one of those gods that was rather sad because everything was dying around them all the time. And they came in and encrypted their Nutanix virtualization infrastructure. We say Nutanix because, after VMware got bought by those other people and decided they didn't want any more customers, a lot of customers went to other virtualization layers. And this one, Nutanix, great company, great capabilities. However, they Anubis came in, encrypted Fairlife's Nutanix infrastructure, and they claimed to have exfiltrated about a terabyte of confidential data. So that's a thing, right? And How did we know? Because as a responsible company, Coca-Cola, which is the owners of the Canadian company Fairlife, filed an SEC Form 8K, which as a listed company, they have to do because they have to report their breaches. And that's one of the big topics of today, Al, breach.
It's a terabyte worth of data
Confidential data. It's
about
not the menu.
milk, right?
Mm. And milk customers and recipes. And Canada is highly regulated. And considering that if you know who buys what, dairy isn't just about milk, but it's also about the production, actually, of a lot of the bacteria and enzymes that power the rest of the food industry. So if you buy salami, that
Mm-hmm.
comes from one of these cultures that has been grown in the dairy industry. So dairy is a lot larger than milk, cheese, etc. There's a ridiculous amount of intellectual
Why?
property that's in the
Why
dairy
do you
industry.
know that?
Because that's why I'm employed to be on this show, Al, to know things.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'm never going to look at salami the same way after knowing that part of an udder could possibly be in my salami. It's very odd, very odd.
Milk
But
powder
yes,
for sure, because it has to be grown on something. Should we go to the irony that is the next slide? And it's a consultancy, right? So Ernst and Young,
another one.
another one. This sounds like something we've done in the series. We've talked about consultancies being breached, and we don't want to invite any bad juju for ourselves. But
Mm.
we would have thought that somebody who sells this stuff is better at containing a breach. And the irony here is that the attackers accessed their IT service management system between the 28th of March and the 12th of April. So it's not overnight. And this was disclosed on the 15th of July via filings again. Why? Because listed companies, right? And compliant companies. So what you would enjoy, Al, is that EY detected this activity on the 23rd of April, which is about 3 weeks after the breach. And what the attackers did here is they didn't go after the core network. They didn't go through the VPN of sadness. They went in through the third-party help system, so the ticketing system
Mm.
for normal people, used by IT people supporting whom? The tax team. Can you imagine? And what was attached to these tickets, Al, were things like tax filing, investment holdings, social security numbers, addresses, financial account details. So there was no extortion demands or ransomware like in our previous case study, but they did have to offer, or not, they did have to offer, they did offer 24 months of Experian credit monitoring to their affected customers. So breach containment, it's larger than just the data leaving the room.
I don't know anymore, Nick. I don't know any more about these big companies getting breached. I mean, look at this one, right? Did we talk about
Oh,
this one?
we haven't yet. And this was an interesting one because, and I like what you've done with the green on the slide, right? So Assurance America, 7 million people across 14 states. Can you imagine? But this is what you'll enjoy. The attack vector was a single compromised employee account credential, a single one. And this was detected on the 17th of March because the attackers were copying files with a whole raft of details. So we had names, contact details, driving license numbers, vehicle information, insurance policy numbers. So just think of what is it, and we've talked about it before on the show extensively. What is it that you need to know to impersonate another human being? So consider how much data left the room and the what happens from a breach after effect. Now, the breach was contained when the session was killed. They reset the user credentials, great, and then they phoned the cops, and of course they had to let customers know. So this was
Mm,
a big deal. 7 million people, 14 US states. It's there's a bit of a theme that we are working with here, and I think the besides it just being in the news, and there are three big stories, right? But they're
mm,
not disconnected,
mm,
because in in each one of these we want to see some kind of a common failure pattern, right? It's not just three stories. It's
mm,
what's missing in the wider sense, and that's what we'll get into for the rest of today's show.
mm. Look, and it's large orgs being hacked. And my biggest question is how long was the threat actor or the nation state actor in before they triggered an alert? Right? Because, when we talk about, for the longest time, I mean, we spoke about it on Wednesday in our preventative maintenance show about, someone gets in and, the stats say that they're in for 200 days before you
Mm.
even, that little thing goes bling, hey, an anomaly has been detected,
If
right?
it does go bling.
Also, yes. And I think we talked about over permissioned everything on Wednesday. But here's the thing, right? Nobody has mentioned in all of the news articles that we've highlighted over the last 7 episodes on when and how long that threat actor's actually been in before something changed to trigger an alert, or
Mm.
in this case, ransomware, I'm locked out of my environment.
Yeah.
From the time they got in, because, I think it was the previous one. Was it the previous one? Clock starts at compromise, right?
Mm.
Where was the other one that we're talking about? I don't know which slide it was on. But they get in, and the first thing threat actors do is they go on a sniffing exercise, reconnaissance, to see what they have access to and what can they actually do. Is it going to be a malicious thing where they're deleting data, or can they encrypt data and ransomware it back, right? I mean, what is the purpose of them physically being in your environment? And part of today's show is really to look at the trend,
Mm.
right? We've got we talked about CVEs a few weeks ago. The last couple of weeks, we talked about data being exposed, exfil, and, also wanting to exchange confidential information and sell it back to the organization for a few Bitcoin, right? Ransomware. Now, today, when we start talking about this detection and response stuff, right? Because all three examples in the news, someone somewhere in IT probably
Mm.
received an alert of sorts, right?
Mm.
How did they figure out that shit, we've been compromised? Something somewhere happened. And typically, it's an alert in a dashboard running in, and those are three big orgs. So
Mm.
they would have a security operations center with a bunch of people sitting in the building, right?
And
Staring
money,
at dashboards. Hey?
money spent on tools. My gosh.
So, and qualification, we do not know if any of those breaches were performed by AI. No information about that. We know that, OpenAI hacked Hugging Face this week,
Mm.
and
In the news.
it was a marketing thing. Let's be honest, right? Sam Altman did not get enough marketing because his friend that used to work for him at Anthropic has been getting all the airtime over the last 3-4 months. Started with
Interesting.
Mythos and then Fable, and then they pulled Fable back, and now we've got access to Fable, and they all in the news about how amazing their AI platform, Anthropic is. So obviously, Sam felt ignored and he orchestrated, I believe, he orchestrated this little, hey, let's go hack Hugging Face so that we can get some airtime. But that was done by agent, right? It's so weird saying an agent, an
An agent.
AI with a
Mm,
personality, some
mm.
instructions, and it went to go do things. And it managed to get in somewhere, and now there's a joint investigation. We don't know if these ones have been attacked by agents, and chances are
Maybe accelerated
threat
by
actors.
agents.
What's that?
Maybe accelerated by agents.
Yeah, there's still someone driving the agent.
Mm,
Agents are not autonomous in that way. They can't come up with what they want to do today. Someone has to tell them what to do today, right? So when we talk about that signal, right? I think it was, who was it that says? One of them said that they responded, right?
mm,
I can't remember, but let's talk about what happens, right? Someone's in your environment, and eventually they walk over a tripwire, and beep, beep, beep. There's alarm bells going off somewhere, right? That should happen. If it doesn't happen, you need to go speak to your security operations center. You have to fire them because they can't. You can't stop everything. You can stop most things, but eventually
mm,
someone's going to get in, and then it's about blast radius and all of these things, right?
mm, mm.
So, where do we start with these things, Nick?
Well, Assurance America, they had a process. And what was nice about the process is there was incident containment. And then they reset the credentials and they let people know. And what we want to reflect on across all three of these is that the answer wasn't a product, right? It wasn't Defender. It was the framework that they had in place. And if we want to throw product names at things, and there's a lot of companies that have spent a lot of money on these products, and XDR has been mentioned as a capability before on the show. However, buying a product doesn't
Mm,
improve
mm,
security, operationalizing the product
no,
does. And I believe that's the entire premise of this slide.
mm. And also, once you get an alert that says, "Ooh, I've detected an anomaly,"
Mm,
the trick is to have a response plan on the back of that. Remember, you can't just pull a cable out of a switch and go, "Well, I'm switching it off. We've closed the case," right? You can't do that in today's world because you have to figure out what this threat actor is actually doing in your environment,
mm,
right? So it's not as simple pulling a network cable out of the back of a switch and say, hey, this threat actor no longer has access to that server. You've got to go through a process, right? Before you go and announce to the world
mm,
or declare to the world that there's an incident, right? And a lot of people don't do that. It's that flight, fright, or freeze, right? The common reactions from a human being when someone's throwing a spear at my forehead, right? I'm going to either catch it, or I'm going to dodge, or I'm going to stand there and it's going to go through my forehead, right? And I don't know if anyone's thrown a spear at your forehead, but I can tell you, it's quite scary. And when I think about an actor getting through my firewall, right, and standing inside of my file server, right, because firewalls were only important when we ran file servers, right? The guy's physically standing there. What are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do? I'm going to shoot the hostage. That's what I'm going to do, Nick. You can't shoot the hostage, right? In this case, you need to be very.
So
Um,
violent today, Alistair. So violent.
it's from what's that movie? Was it Backdraft? I'm going to shoot the hostage. Keanu Reeves.
Oh, wow. Good
Yeah.
golly. When you were talking about spears, I was thinking of bears. If a bear came at me, what would I do? And one of two responses come to mind. One is I would think about maybe I'm dying, and the other one is if it's culturally appropriate. There's a lot of meat on that bear. You could feed a lot of people when you cook a bear.
Look, I don't know what's worse, being charged by an elk, which is decent meat, versus a
Hmm.
bear, which is tough meat, right? So when we look at this, and let's talk through the anatomy of a breach, right?
Mm,
Have we done a session on the anatomy of a breach? We haven't. No, I don't think we have, right?
mm,
But talking about the anatomy of a breach. So when that signal, the first thing, right? Ping, 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 ping. And I think organizations that don't understand how these things work, it's not just fairy dust. Someone sprinkles some unicorn sprinkles over your firewall, and all of a sudden everything's back to normal. We need to understand the process behind what happens when there is a breach inside of the organization.
mm.
Pick a number, Nick, between 1 and 5.
12.
It's not between 1 and 5, but you can start with 1 and 2, and then I'll carry on with 3, 4, and 5, seeing as you went for 1 and 2, right?
Yes. All right, let's stay with 2.
Okay. So we've exhausted the possibilities of a flag coming in and it's saying detect. You need to make sure that you interpret the signals correctly. Last week we talked about those signals and how you should be using the tooling to detect anomalies, right?
It's hard words on a Friday afternoon, right? Hard words.
It is. But from an anomaly, once you've detected the anomaly, there's some weird shit happening inside of your network.
Mm,
Um, you need to typically a engineer would go to someone who has the authority to declare,
mm, mm.
right? So
And
now we
that
talk about
someone could actually be a system, Al, because if you've got, and we haven't talked about automation, but if you've got an indicator of compromise that's being picked up by a seam or a saw, it would tell you that there's a thing, like Jeremy Clarkson says, I've done a thing. So it's done a
mm,
thing and it's told you that there is what we would call an incident. So an incident occurs, and now that we have an incident, we need to do something.
mm,
Somebody needs to do something. So
mm.
something happens. I've arrived in Alistair's house uninvited at 3 o'clock in the morning,
With a
and
spear,
he,
with a
with a
spear.
spear,
Yeah.
throwing it at foreheads, and he has decided he's going to pick up his phone and he's going to declare an incident. So what happens next, Al?
I'm going to lift the shield of power. I'm going to lift the shield of power. But we
You've
were
watched
talking
He-Man
about.
on Prime, haven't you?
I couldn't get through it, man. I could
Mm,
not get through it. I struggled, eh?
mm,
I struggled. Yeah, I have the power, but the power of Grayskull. It's like I lived that life, right? Back in
It didn't
the
have the
80s.
effect on me as when I was 5. I felt much more
Yes,
empowered
yeah.
by the
I
tooling.
liked
Yeah.
the cameo, the Dolph Lundgren cameo right in the beginning. That was cool, but the rest was just no. It's a
Mm,
no from me, right?
mm.
So let's talk about it. How long did it take EY to declare an incident, right?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
That was 3 months before they declared,
Yeah.
right? So typically, like Nick says, declare, and now you need to work on the process of containing that spread, right? Before you do other things, speaking to the rest of
Mm,
business like legal and
mm,
regulators. Um, what does that process actually look like when we move into containing the well, one, you've got to figure out what happened or who's still in and
mm.
what are they doing inside of your network. You can't just switch everything off and stick your head in the sand like an ostrich, right?
Well, one of the things that you've spoken about extensively, Al, is run into the data center and unplug the firewall. But if this happens
Yeah.
inside your tenant, or if this happens inside your infrastructure where something's going to typhoid Mary, then you containment tends to be something where you stop something, right?
Mm,
And that could be if you're running Defender EDR. I'm just going to pick on Defender EDR because we're rather capable at this. It can shut down a machine that's doing strange things, right?
mm.
And uh, I'm just quickly want to go back to the points that you had around communicate and recover. And one of the things we wrote about extensively in the Zero Trust Adoption Framework is the responsibility that everybody has when we talk security. and we can talk about the Microsoft Security Adoption Framework, or the
Mm,
Microsoft Cyber Security Reference Architecture, or the
mm,
Zero Trust Adoption Framework. There are no shortages of framework that you can adopt. And in the adoption framework, when we talk about communicate, there's a shared responsibility of how do we communicate
mm,
responsibly when it comes to breach.
mm.
And what you were talking about earlier, Al, is that if you're not prepared for that, if you haven't practiced who needs to do what, then we kind of end up here.
Well, look, adoption framework, and you can prefix that with whatever. Cloud adoption, well architected framework, the AFs, right?
Mm,
Um, Zero trust adoption framework, there's a security adoption framework. All of those things talk about putting together an actual reactive response plan, right?
mhm,
Not proactive, because you can't predict these things. This is not minority report, although we do tell you to assume breach, right? You have to
mm,
assume breach and prepare for breach, right? So a bit of a minority report in there and a bit of spear throwing, right? Stop the bleed, number one. Our discipline, number one. We've got 3 disciplines in today's show. Discipline number one is to stop that breach, right? Or stop the bleed. And then go and look at what happened, right? And also understand that there are times where you can't stop, because if you stop, something's attached to it. Let's say it's a conveyor belt PC, right? Or
mm.
like that Windows 95 machine you saw about 6 years ago that was still managing the shaft of a mine, right? Okay.
Yes.
You can't just switch the machine off. So you need to figure out what the best attack path is
Mm.
to stopping the bleed before you dismantle everything. Like, get everyone out of the mine, up the lift that brings people up from a kilometer down, and then you can switch the machine off that controls the mechanism that goes up and down the mine shaft, right? So that's the first thing, right? You can't just randomly go pull network cables out. As much as I've done that, I've pulled a network cable out of an FTP server because I was hacked
Ah, FTP. Yes.
in
Wow.
2000 and in 2000.
Mm,
Yes, yeah. Right. So, discipline number one, containment, understand what's going on. Make sure that when you kill the access, right, to whatever application, whatever platform, whatever infrastructure that's been compromised, that it
mm,
doesn't negatively impact anything that's running inside of your business. Moving on from there, and Nick, this is the responsible part of
mm.
everything, right? How do we communicate this, right? Because we talk about
It's
incident responders, right? They're like
yes.
firefighters, right? Buildings on fire. Someone phones the fire department, and 5 guys jump into a fire engine, and they put the alarm on, and they drive down the road, and then they show up, right? And everyone's got different roles inside of that.
Mm.
So, discipline number two, you need a communication plan after something's been compromised and been.
Well, this is interesting. Hmm. So now it appears either I'm talking to myself and I'm the one who's offline, but I can still see myself. So this might be me running in the browser, or we have in fact lost Alistair. and I'm wondering if he doesn't have a fiber break. And since he was presenting, let's just see what happens next. I believe he might be having a power failure. Viewers, it is official. Alistair's had a power failure. We do apologize for the sudden loss of power, but there is a chance that Alistair might be returning imminently. And it does appear that he's back. Hello, Alistair.
I've been having problems.
Hello.
With power in my house, for whatever the reason.
I thought it was
It's
me.
literally,
And I was looking at myself and I was wondering, am I just looking at a picture of myself with the JavaScript drill still running in Chrome, or have I lost you? It was a little bit mysterious for a while.
How long was that? Was my recovery time quick?
I think it was yes. Your incident recovery time was gratifyingly quick. Obviously, we lost a few frames. I reckon we've probably lost 2 or 3 minutes of the broadcast.
Entirely possible. So one voice, four audiences, and that's where I left off before everything just shut down. It's as if someone attacked my power grid. And we've
Rather
seen those
rudely.
movies, right? I don't know how much of this you spoke about, Nick.
So actually, since the slide wasn't there, none of it. But I'd like to posit a thought at this point, Al.
Yes.
Because everything that you've spoken about and what happened with the power is just beautiful, right? Because if we think of this as a response, instead of saying incident response is important, we should say that incident response isn't something that you build during an incident. And I feel like that is the backbone of everything that we have spoken about. Everything that we are showing here is on the basis of you have adopted some or all of the AFs that we've spoken about, the adoption frameworks, either the MCRA or the MSSAF. You've done this beforehand, and the good incident response that you just illustrated as an example is an outcome of having adopted an architecture, not the architecture, an architecture beforehand. And I say an because there's no shortage of architectures. But what we did see in the 3 incidents that we talked about at the beginning of the show is only the last one actually appeared to have a plan, including how to communicate.
You know, once you have a plan and once you've sort of figured out what to do with the threat actor in your building, Nick in my house with a spear, right? I'm going to spray pepper spray at his eyes so that he can't see me. And then I'm going to kick him behind the shin with my knee so he drops to the floor. And once I've got him contained, right, which is very difficult to do, I'm going to phone the police, right, and say, hey, all right, come show up, pick the guy up. He's bleeding on my floor because I stabbed him with the spear. And once he leaves, now I need to figure out how he got in and make sure that that window now has burglar bars on it, right? Because that's where we want to go.
You have to restore your previous personality back up because you've gone from calm and composed L to scared and angry L, and you need to roll back and you need to restore that backup that you had of yourself on the memory stick.
Well, that's also the other thing, right? How do you know? And I had this happen to me where, I had guys break into my house and the cops actually caught them. And then the cop said to me, well, can you go through the house while they were sitting in the back of the van? Can you go through the house to make sure that what was taken was anything taken, right? And strange thing, one of the guys that they caught that was in the back of the van had a pair of my shoes on. He left his old shoes in my lounge.
No.
And I walked up and I said, these are not my shoes. and they walked me to the back of the van, opened the door, and the guy had my shoes on. I took my shoes back, never wore it again. I took it back. And in very much the same way, right? You have to perform that process to go check what's been taken, right? What's been compromised. Can you recover from whatever incident happened in your environment, right? And as much as we say, when someone breaks into your house, it's a bad feeling, but your life doesn't stop, right? You can't blame yourself. You can't blame the kids. I mean, you can't blame your spouse. It happened. The end, right? And then we need to understand what caused the problem, or what was the vulnerability, right? Be it a house, be it a firewall, be it a server room, be it a cloud service, right? We have to figure out what that vulnerability was and patch it so that the same thing doesn't happen again. I mean, that's typically our approach
That
to.
assumes, though, that there is only one entry vector, and we know that, classically speaking, when there is a breach, we have anywhere between 2 and 3 and sometimes 5 entry vectors that are in an infrastructure, because once you've gone in, the very first thing that you do is you make sure that you've got multiple ways of getting in again, because we expect to be locked out, right? And what we have during incident containment is we establish the primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary, potentially. See what I did there? Hard thing to do with numbers on a Friday afternoon, but quaternary entry vectors into an infrastructure. And what we saw with Fairlife is that they recovered, absolutely. They were clean, hopefully. Was there anyone else in the infrastructure? And that's kind of the point of the slide. How do we know? How do we know unless we have found all the doors, windows, blankets over the electric fence, if you consider that as an entry vector, or maybe even another person hiding in the boot of your car in the garage looking to break in again after the first lot have been arrested. So backup is not the same as clean until you can certify that you are clean again.
Well, yes. A lot has to happen during this time, right? A lot happens, right? You need to hopefully have a decent backup of that ransomware encrypted data that they've stolen, right? And then also verify that the human is actually, they took Nick out of my house. The police took Nick out of my house. And Nick's friends weren't with him. They were not with him. It was just him, a single threat actor. So ensure that you understand that there are no additional holes in your network for Nick's friends to show up and do his things, right? So from here, I suppose our closing thoughts, right, on what we should be building, right? And like Nick said, it's like when a plane goes into, they always have in these movies where something's gone wrong and they rip out that big lever arch file and there's an alert on the dashboard and they go to page 72 of this massive lever arch file to go, oh, this is talking about cabin pressure. We need to drop the nose to 10,000 feet so that, cabin pressure is restored, because that's an acceptable level to fly at before humans fly out the windows, because that did happen recently. There was a weird accident with a hole in the window. It got sucked out and the guy, they had to keep him. And in very much the same way that you need a playbook, like, airline pilots have a playbook when something goes wrong with the plane, you too need a playbook that follows a specific course, right? And it doesn't have to be a massive 60-page binder, because you'll never get to a point where you actually do things. But on the left, if everyone's staring at the screen, you need responsible people in the room, right? Like any other disaster recovery plan, And for those that have been through disaster recovery plans before, especially if you worked in a commercial building and they used to do that fire alarm thing once every 3 months, and you all used to congregate and someone would stand there with a clipboard figuring out, okay, are we all safe? All right, what's the next steps? Is the building on fire? No, it's not on fire. What happened? Someone fell, the lift stopped working, there was a power surge, we're all out of the building. You need that plan. And you need responsible people in the room, someone that's going to manage the incident, the technical people that you need, someone that can communicate this information back to business, and then someone to document the incident and how it was managed, so that when you do a post-mortem, part of your post-mortem, after you've recovered, you can look at how well the detection and the response was handled by the organization. I wonder if EY and the people at Coca-Cola went through a similar process. Surely they should have something in place that talks to this,
Surely.
right?
I love that you talk about the documentation, and we talked about this a little bit earlier with Hugging Face. Do you know that Hugging
Hmm.
Face had 70,000 incidents in the incident log, or various logs, which included entry logs and app logs, etc. And that's what made this so hard, is that there was a lot. There was a lot to go through, and that was part of their timelines, decisions, evidence log, and they actually needed their own offline LLM to process all of those logs, L, because there was so much data. And the clever thing about those 70,000 incidents that they had to process is that were some intentional false positives to throw people off. So consider what you're looking at. And we talked about the multiple entry vectors. When you document the output of this incident, and obviously dramatic thing that happened at Hugging Face, but when you document it, you want to go back to the learnings of what is it that you learned. And there was a timeline. How fast were you there? Were decisions made? Were any good decisions made? And then the evidence log, especially if you are a regulated organization, will be required, because the regulator will ask you, what did you do? What did you do? And how does that relate to how compliant you are to the regulation that you have to subscribe
Hmm.
to?
Hmm. Look, it's something that you need, right, as an organization, and you should practice this anyway, right? You should practice this, and it all comes down to ownership of these roles inside of the organization. And for those that actually are paying an organization to worry about your security, actually ask them for their incident response plan. They should have one, right?
Mm.
You should actually benchmark their service based on, if someone's identity was compromised in your tenant and they staring at signals coming through on a dashboard, what is their incident response plan? How do they communicate it back to you? How do you communicate it back to business? And who do you tell about the possible reputational loss? Because it always comes down to that, right? Reputational loss
Mm.
of what's going on. So, in closing, a couple of things. Don't sit on the fact that you've been compromised. Someone needs
Or
to
that
take
you
ownership
haven't
of
been
it.
compromised yet.
Hey?
Well, consider what we're talking about on the slide. Normal. Does that mean that there's no one in the house? So last week we talked about the person that was hiding in the roof of the toy store building
Ah,
for
yes,
months and
that
months and
movie. Yeah.
months, right? So nominal, nothing. He didn't trigger anything, right? Can hide
Hmm.
an awful lot. And if there was no ownership of what happens under the following circumstances, then at the time when the incident is declared, when you realize there's a person in the house and you say, well, whose turn is it to go to the living room and fight Nick with a spear? That's the wrong time to figure these things out.
Yeah. Yes. And also, you need to, there's no one man, right? There's no Daniel Craig here. There's no James Bond 007, right? It's, they say it takes a village. And it definitely takes a village to recover from an incident, right? It
It's
can't be
true.
one person. If you have one person that's responsible for all of these things and you the boss, you're wrong. If you're not the boss, you need to go speak to the boss and say, we can't have one person that has all the keys to all the doors in our house and
Mm,
they've just left the building. Can't have that. Also, from an actions perspective, when we talk about, discover, communicate, remediate, all of those things, you need a documented one pager. That's our recommendation. A documented one pager that says if this happens in very much the same way you do disaster recovery, when there's an incident in the building, you need the same process that you can follow. In big buildings, they'll have someone that can do CPR. Someone's been allocated as the person in charge that wears the little yellow jacket. You need a bunch of those people inside of your organization. Even if you are not maintaining your security operations center, you're still going to need a process internally because you, as the person that's being breached or the organization that has been breached, still has to communicate information publicly. Look at Coca-Cola, EY, and what is that other one? Assure America or something. They all had to publicly say, hey, data leak, ransomware, we sorry.
mm,
And you need to have all of these things in play. Uh, don't just assume that it's never going to happen and you're not going to say anything and sit on it for 3 months, right? That's not the case. Fix everything, have a plan. We always say have a plan. And, when you assume breach, if you practice zero trust, you would assume that someone's going to get into your network
with
and you
its
should have
skills.
a recovery plan.
That's right.
And Nick, I think we're at the end of the show. Some
We
top
are
tips from
indeed.
you.
The top tip from me, Al, is that it's all around preparation, and no one likes to think about an incident and that it could happen. However, there are a raft of frameworks to choose from. Pick a framework, take one of the free ones. The MCRA is free.
Mm,
Change out the product names that you don't like, but rather have something than nothing. And don't build your incident response during the incident, but do what El's been talking about, which is when you do these paper based exercises, also known as a tabletop, and you build the what would happen and who would own what during an incident, then you have a raft of preparation which helps you so much as opposed to having nothing when an incident occurs.
mm. Have a plan. You never fail to plan, you plan to fail. Plan to fail. If you don't fail to plan, plan to fail. Plans don't fail. Fails, I don't know what order that is in, right? It's something about planning to fail or failing to plan. Failing to plan, that's it. If you fail to plan, your plan will make you fail, right? Because there is no plan. And
It's
that's it.
like one of those anti-motivational posters manifested right there, Al. It's
Demotivationals, right?
demotivationals. Failure.
Yeah, failure. It is you. It's not them. Right?
It's very good.
All
It's been a
right.
good Friday. It's been a good week.
That is it for another episode of SCI Fridays. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You now officially know more about your environment than we ever signed off. We're covered by the firewall. If you've got something interesting that you'd like us to talk about and you don't want us to follow the program, please like, link, subscribe, comment on the
Comment.
YouTube channel or on LinkedIn. And we'll happily change the format of our show
Mm.
if you have something special that you want us to talk about. And that's it. It's a Friday. Have a great weekend, Nick, and we'll
And you
catch you
too,
next
Al.
Friday. Ciao, ciao.
Have a good week, you all. Bye bye.